Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Schmoedown Rundown. Introducing first, Frankie Stab Janisch, and the host of the Schmoedown Rundown, Brad Gilmore.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Schmoedown Rundown, the official episode of the movie trivia Schmoedown. My name is Brad Gilmore, but you might know me by another name. You might know me as The Boat. Hashtag best of all time, hashtag Brad's Opinion's true, hashtag boat life, hashtag I'm on a boat, and Frank Janisch. If you're wondering why I'm a little low on energy, it's because we're recording this earlier than normal. And Frank Janisch, welcome into the rundown. How are you?
Welcome into the rundown. I'm doing pretty good. It's officially fall. It's officially autumn, especially in the Midwest now with the weather or the temperatures dropping. I got hoodie weather now. You know, I got my little Bobby and the Juice hoodie that I won.
Oh yeah,
from
show
Mr.
that to
Tom
the camera.
Dagnino back in Chicago when he was here, and I had to bet against Who's the Boss winning, and Dagnino took that bet, rightfully so. Then he lost that bet, and so he ponied up like a man of his word, and I still have the hoodie.
You still have the
and,
little Bobby and the Juice hoodie.
Yeah.
He owned up to it, and I will say I do enjoy fall, especially here in the South. It is a nice, cool 90 degrees in Houston, Texas today.
Wow.
And it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful day.
You know, it's crazy. It's actually like 3 days ago, it was like 88 degrees here. And then the next day, it was like 65. That's the Midwest for you.
Well, you know what they say, baby, won't you love me to the 98 degrees. It's an old, I don't know if you remember
I hear
that.
people say that all the time. Yeah,
You know,
all the
you know
time.
what I mean?
That's what they say.
Hey, man, we got a lot to talk about because there were several matches that took place this week, including a live throwdown, which we previewed on last week's show. And also, there were two tournament matches that happened. A lot of news happened. The Nuke broke, and a multitude of things, Frank Janisch. We also are scheduled to have a special guest on the program today. You know him as the Kid, but you also might know him as the fine, young Tenderoni. He's gonna.
You might. Yeah,
you might. He's gonna be stepping inside the rundown here today. So we're gonna talk about that. But I think that we should start off the show talking about the most recent news that broke, and that was the news of one young Kristian Harloff is. If you watched Collider Live yesterday, I mean, spoiler alert if you didn't. Kristian Harloff is, as of November 1st, no longer a part of the Collider network. He is moving on to dedicate most of his time, or all of his time, to the SEN network, the Schmoedown Entertainment Network. And I got to be honest, I was caught a little off guard by this. Because Kristian really was the reason I ever went and started watching Collider. You know, I mean, watching the Schmoedown. And Kristian was the reason for the Schmoedown, Kristian and Mark. And the only shows that I really enjoy are Collider Live and with the Schmoedown when it was on there. And I mean, no disrespect to anyone else. I'm just saying those are the only shows that I watch typically. And I even tune in for Jedi Council. Even though I'm not a big Star Wars guy, I just enjoy the talk sometimes. So it is weird for me. But I'm going to give it to you first, Frank Janisch. What did you think about the news of Kristian Harloff, the creator of the Schmoedown, leaving Collider?
I think it makes sense in a way. I think with Kristian launching the SEN network, obviously, and putting more and more of his time into the Schmoedown, I think this was probably an eventual happening. I think also at the spot that he was at, I think it was probably like a good balance between the stuff he was doing at Collider, and then he would do Jedi Council and Collider Live and maybe a couple things here and there once in a while. And then the rest of his time was dedicated to Schmoedown, you know, booking live events, getting the venues, doing this and that and the other with the Patreon, and then setting up the SEN network. Obviously, that's going to take a little bit more chunk of his time. So people have said, you know, the writing was on the wall. You know, this was going to happen. Sure, I thought it was going to happen, but I didn't know how soon it was going to be, or if that was later down the line. At least maybe we'd finish out the year. But this announcement came, and I said, yeah, you know, I think it makes sense from Kristian's side of things, at least. I mean, it looked like an amicable split. So I know Fernandez had his thoughts and his concerns and I guess they didn't see eye to eye on some things. And look, I think this was going to eventually happen, so why not just do it now? Maybe was kind of part of it. I don't know. I wasn't in those talks, but I think some people were. I saw in some comments wondering what's going to happen with the Schmoedown. I was like, if anything, this is going to be more Schmoedown. This is going to be full steam ahead with the SEN network. This is, as far as I know, this is all he has on his plate right now.
Right.
And a lot of other shows are coming back. Reviews are coming back with Mark Ellis. So this is going back in the days that precede actually my fan involvement with, Toad Hop and AfterBuzz and Phase 4, 5, and all that stuff. So I think old school Schmoedown fans or Schmoes No fans should be excited about what Kristian has planned for.
Frank, I think that you're right. And, I know you said that the writing was on the wall, and I've never been somebody with that extrasensory perception. I never knew when my high school girlfriends were going to break up with me. That's why they always ended up breaking up with me, and I couldn't cut them off at the pass, try to get a win in the win column. So I never knew that kind of thing. So I didn't see the writing on the wall personally for this Collider Kristian split, if you will. And I think that you made a point, though, where you said it was going to happen eventually anyway. And if that's the case, it is best to kind of let's just get it going. You know what I mean? Let's have an exit, and then let's, focus on the new projects at hand. Or as they said in Seinfeld, you got to do it like a Band-Aid, right off, And I think that, and that was kind of sort of the situation that happened. Now, it's weird for me because, like I said, Kristian brought me into Collider, not me as the talent, me as a fan. And that was the reason I enjoyed Collider, because I enjoyed Kristian's take on things. That's why I enjoyed Collider Live, because I thought that he was the real anchor of the show. And I will say it's a little bit odd, and I don't know, and I'm not saying that I'm not going to support Collider or anything remotely like that. Just because Kristian's no longer involved, I'm going to say as a fan, I don't know how my viewing habits are going to be, because it was such a thing of, let me turn on Collider Live. It's at noon. I'm run around town, listen to this thing for 2 hours. Kristian, Dorina, Roxy. I love just the vibe of everybody. And of course, you're still going to have the majority of those people on that show. You're going to have Ken Knapsack on Jedi Council, who is another person that you and I both enjoy immensely. And he's an author of a Star Wars book. So I'm sure he's going to be rather knowledgeable. But it's going to be a strange thing for me. And I just wonder how many people are like me, to where it's like, it was so routine. I'm so used to hearing this voice on this channel. I don't know how many people are going to, are people going to move out in masses? Are people going to stick around? Do people still enjoy the brand and enjoy Collider Live, the show? I don't know. These are all the things I've been thinking, and I don't know the answers to any of them. I know I'm going to support everybody whom I enjoy. That includes Roxy Stryer, Josh McCouga, John Roca, Jay Washington, Ken, whoever else is over there, who's Schmoedown related and who you and I have both gotten the privilege of knowing over the past several years. Of course, I'm going to still go support them. Kristian was the guy who brought me in. And I think it's like this. Just like many people pick who they're going to vote for or what party they represent. A lot of people pick their party not based upon their own personal ideals. A lot of people pick it based upon what they grew up with, what they've always known, whatever their family was. And I think it's also almost like some people drink Coke, some people drink Pepsi. There's no rhyme or reason to it. They're both essentially the same with a couple differences. They're both the same soda, but some people prefer Pepsi over Coke and Coke over Pepsi. And I think that that's kind of the situation that's here. Some people like Kristian Harloff, that represents Coca-Cola. Some people like the brand of Collider, that's Pepsi. It's still all kind of the same thing. You just sometimes have your preference. And I think that that's how this probably will play out. Now, I know both Mark and Kristian, Mark Fernandez, that is, and Kristian Harloff, both want all the fans of Collider to support both brands. And I think that that's a possibility for sure, as long as the content remains the same. But, we are on the Schmoedown Entertainment Network. So that, to me, is now home team a little bit. So I'm going to kind of support Schmoedown Entertainment Network a little bit more. And I think everyone can understand that. I'm going to make sure that this network is as successful as humanly possible. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it's successful. But, you still always have the option. It's even like the wrestling war from this week. Are you with WWE or are you with AEW? Well, I watched both of them because I like wrestling.
Right.
And if you like movies, Schmoedown, movie-related talk, any of that stuff, you can watch both of them.
Right, and it's not like I don't foresee Kristian having a movie talk like show on the SEN network with him at least, because we've heard his thoughts, recently and in the past about it gets kind of repetitive for him or stale at times. So you can always go to movie talk and then switch over to SEN and get some crazy antics with Kate Mulligan, Brett Sheridan, and Kristian on those live streams. So yeah, I think you can play in both sandboxes,
For sure. And if you miss one, you can go check it out later. I mean,
exactly.
It is YouTube.
That's the thing. It's like it's not once it airs, it's not gone forever. You can always go back and watch it if you want to watch one at one time, and then it's not a big deal, really.
Yeah. So I think that it definitely is the end of an era, and that era isn't over yet. I mean, you have until November 1st,
right?
That Kristian's going to be on there, but it was a weird feeling for me as a longtime fan of all that to be like, oh wow, like, no Kristian Harloff. I mean, similarly, I enjoyed John Campea when he was on Movie Talk, and I know that he left and came back and left and came back and left again, and it was always a weird transition. People trying to find their footing, and then they found it. With kind of Kristian as the helm, really the face of Collider. Yeah. Kristian and Mark Ellis, the Schmoes were really drove the majority of the content over there, at least in my estimation, for a long period of time. Yeah,
and I'll say this about Kristian. I mean, he is a big personality, right? And so with him leaving, that opens the door for other types of personalities there to grow or to shine, and some of those people just might surprise you. You never saw that kind of side of them because Kristian was there, and that's not it's not a dig at Kristian or whoever. It's just people occupy certain amounts of space when you're in that kind of environment. And with his departure at the end of the month, you never know what you might see from Riley or from Akuga or from Ken on Jedi Council, how he is in that environment. So people might think, I'm not going to watch because he's not there, but stay tuned. Some people might surprise you.
I think that's a good point. I mean, me working with Booker on the show, Booker is a large personality. He's a very large personality. So I have to know when to get my spots in and then when to fall back. I'm not the full boat all the time over there on the Hall of Fame because you just kind of have to find your niche in that particular show. So you're right. Other personalities can thrive due to it. And it wasn't intentionally holding down of any kind. It was just, this is my kind of show. I'm kind of running it. So obviously you're going to divert to me most of the time. So it's a weird feeling. It's probably going to be even more strange when noon Central Time rolls around and there's no Kristian on Collider Live. And I don't want this to sound bad, but like on the days that he wasn't there,
yeah,
a lot of times I didn't listen.
Oh, okay.
Because he was kind of the guy who, for me, just he steered the ship in the right way. He knew when the bit wasn't funny anymore. He knew when we needed to go to the next topic. He always kind of knew that. And that's why I've always really appreciated him more as a host. Like I kind of was like, man, this guy's really good at steering the ship with all these different personalities. But I'm definitely going to support Collider, and I'm going to root for the home team, obviously, always with SEN. So what do y'all think about Kristian Harloff's departure from Collider? Sad, mad, happy, indifferent? Leave the comments below. But I know the one thing that I definitely know is he's going to go so hard on all things movie trivia Schmoedown. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait. I really cannot wait. He's going to go so hard on all things movie trivia Schmoedown related. And that's the reason you and I really are still here, because we love the Schmoedown.
Yeah, and look, that's what I'm most excited about, because with Kristian having pretty much almost all of his time now able to dedicate to growing the Schmoedown, growing the network, in the short amount of time that I've gotten to know Kristian, when he's laser focused on something and wants to make something happen, it like 99% of the time it's going to come to fruition. And I'm just excited to see his plans that he has for the network be implemented. And, it might not all come at once. He's got a method to his own madness, I'm sure, and things will appear when he deems that they should appear and work out. And so I think, honestly, selfishly, in regards for him leaving Collider, I'm excited for this reason, because he's taking the Schmoedown to such heights already, having dual responsibilities between Schmoedown and Collider, and now that the Collider stuff is coming to an end, I'm just excited for the future of the Schmoedown really now.
Absolutely. The future of the Schmoedown, I think, is bright. And to echo the same sentiment, when Kristian told me, like, it was like over a year ago or something, he was like, yeah, we're going to start doing live shows for the Schmoedown. I was like, oh, really? Live? You're going to like do it live on stage? He's like, yeah. And then my plan is do a couple in LA, and then we're going to tour. We're going to go New York. We're going to hit everywhere. We're going to go Chicago. And I was like, oh, man, hey, that sounds great. In my head, I'm like, how's he going to pull this off?
Yeah.
And then he pulled it off. I mean, it's phenomenal.
We have a nationwide tour this year. I mean, it's we went from just a few shows in LA to going across the country. It's insane. And some of the things he said, like, hey, we're gonna do the Anarchy. I was like, I don't know if that's gonna work. And guess what? It worked. And then, like, hey, we're gonna launch Patreon. I was like, you might get a decent amount of Patreon subscribers, but that's blown up. And so everything that he's put his mind to and set out to accomplish, he's done. And I think with now, like I said, with his full energy towards the Schmoedown and the SN network, that's why I'm excited.
The sky is the limit, brother, as Macho Man Randy Savage once said. So I'm excited too. And there is another crazy idea by Kristian Orloff called the Nuke that we're gonna have to get into here in a little while. Very nuts, very crazy, very unexpected was the Nuke. Actually, we spoiled it for everybody last week.
That's right.
What
we were a little
was.
off, but we got most of the points, I thought.
Well, I think we got the key details out there. I think people really understood what we were going for.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that we should first talk about the Schmoedown Throwdown from last week. Shouldn't we talk about that, Frank Janisch? Because it was the first thing that happened, and you and I were both there. That's
right. We were there for this one and a slew of other matches that happened at the studio. But this one, I was very, very much anticipating. It was a rematch.
Yes. It was a rematch, and it was a match that you and I spent a lot of time discussing last week, and I was pretty confident with Janine winning. And I explained a lot of my reasons last week, and to reiterate a couple of them, my biggest reason was I just felt that she was due. I mean, right now, the baseball playoffs are in full swing. You see what I did there? It's a pun. By the way, check out Ken Knapsack's articles on flagsports.com. If you're a baseball fan, Ken Knapsack is actually collaborating with one of Reality Wrestling's commentators, the lead commentator, Matt Topolsky, on flagsports.com with the series of baseball articles that have just been phenomenal.
I thought you were going to say...
I mean, he's hit it out of the park.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say check out Swings and Misses with Jen Sturger and Cody Decker.
Jen Sturger.
Right.
Check that out. Check that out. I was supposed to be on that show.
Hey.
Schedules. You know what I mean? Schedules. Doesn't matter. Anyway, Ken Knapsack, I brought him up for some unknown reason. I can't remember why. But, yes, because we're in this full swing of baseball playoffs. And in baseball, sometimes when a guy is really good, but he just isn't making contact with the ball. I think last year and the year before, really in the playoffs, Josh Reddick from the Houston Astros was like that. The guy's really good. He can always get you a really good hit when it's needed, but he went through a little bit of a slump. And every time he'd come up to bat, I'd say, all right, Josh Reddick's due. Because the law of averages at some point has to take over, and the baseball gods are going to give him a hit. It's a thing that in baseball. The hitter's due. You're due for a hit, right? Or he's due for a home run. And I thought Janine the Machine was due for a big win. And I actually was sitting next to Chandru as this match was going on, and you. I think we were sitting next to each other. I was in the middle. I was in a Frank Chandru sandwich, and I was really happy about it.
Wow.
And he and I were talking before the match. He's like, who you got? I said, I got Janine. And I was like, who you got? He's like, I got Janine. And I was like, man, if Mike Kalinowski spins James Bond movies, I think I'm going to quit the Schmoedown and I'm going to walk out of this room. And I said that because I was very confident there was no possible way ever in the history, in the universe, it would allow the wheel to spin James Bond for Mike Kalinowski ever again. And I was wrong. He spun James Bond after a very competitive round one. I think what was the point differential after round one? It was like 1 point, maybe?
2 points.
2
Janine
points,
had
okay.
7, and Mike went perfect with the bonus. So it's not
Perfect
like
with the bonus.
Janine was a slouch in the first round. I mean, it's a great first round. You missed one question. And it was the, this one hurt, actually. It was the Back to the Future quote. It was, you mean to tell me my mother's got the hots for me and couldn't pull the film, obviously, Back to the Future. And that was the only one she missed. But, I mean, Mike went 9, and then, round 2, he spins away from Martin Scorsese, and well, I mean, as soon as he landed on Scorsese, I was like, well, he's gonna spin again. He's gonna spin again.
Right.
Right. You have to.
Right.
And then you're right. Then he gets James Bond. What's interesting? Last week I said I don't know if Mike Kalinowski can beat Janine by having all the things go his way. Now I'm not going to say round 1 went his way. It's an even back and forth between himself and Janine. Round 2, you get some luck with that wheel, and he's had a hot hand with in teams against Janine the first time. He spun spinners and then took Bond. And this time spinning Bond again. I said, I just don't know if Mike Kalinowski can beat Janine without getting James Bond. And guess what? I kind of got the answer, but not really, because he spun James Bond again. And so while he had as perfect as you can have as a first round, he still got Bond. And so it was honestly, I was in total disbelief. I don't think that room, mind you, reminds me sort of how the room was when Andrew Guy was beating Dan Murrow. The uproar in that studio reminded me very much of like what is going on here. Very much reminded me of that Dan Murrow Andrew Guy match, and the crowd in that studio was just beside themselves. I mean, you could hear it. The sound
pissed.
doesn't do it any. You stormed off. You literally stormed off. You got up.
Yeah, I walked out of the studio.
It was insane.
I couldn't believe it.
It was insane. And the funny thing is,
and it was. Go ahead.
Yeah, the best part is Mike Kalinowski kind of clicks back into character, and he's going, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear it. All this. I mean, you got to lean into it at that point.
Well, here's the thing. It's on the wheel.
Yeah.
The probability of him spinning it is equal to probability of spinning any other category on that wheel, and the luck of Kalinowski continued for that match and continues, because he went on to win. But here's why I think this win with him getting Bond is still an earned win for Mike Kalinowski, because Janine goes up and she gets Cameron Diaz, and she actually goes perfect in Cameron Diaz.
Sure.
And Mike Kalinowski did not go perfect in James Bond. He missed one. He missed the Bernard Lee question, which I knew. So
did.
Whenever we have that inevitable exhibition match, I was actually for everyone to know, I was whispering in Frank Janisch's ear on every Bond question.
I was like, okay, yes, I got it. I know it. I know you know. But you did beat Mike in that round.
I did. So I'm just saying. You're my witness.
It's true.
You're my witness.
I know Tim Franco has something to say about that as well. I'm sure he's a big Bond fan, and Emma might.
Emma 5.
So
Emma knew it.
We might.
As soon as I walked out of the studio after that match, Emma goes, "Did you know Bernard Lee?"
Really?
I was like, "Yeah, I knew Bernard Lee. Yeah, I knew it. All right, get off your high horse there. 5. I knew it." But Janine gets that. Cameron Diaz.
But yeah, that's what I want to say about the Cameron Diaz thing is it's not as narrow focused as Bond. So I understand what you're saying.
Not.
They both got strengths, yes, but just because you get Cameron Diaz doesn't mean you're asking about Cameron Diaz starred in this film. Cameron Diaz, played this character. This movie with Cameron Diaz came out in what year? It's not necessarily have to be those types of questions. It can be this actor starred with Cameron Diaz in this whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so you never know what you're going to get with those types of actor-actress categories. It's not as narrow focused as Bond. Yes, it's still a strength. It's obviously a huge get if you know Cameron Diaz's filmography and you're able to rifle through that, but it's not quite as narrow focused as Bond. But I do agree that, for the most part, the round 2s kind of did even out.
Hold on.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Okay, so I was going to try to see how many movies Cameron Diaz had compared to James Bond, because James Bond, of course, does have...
It might be the same.
Has 24 official movies, 1 unofficial, actually 2 unofficial movies, and then there's a 25th official movie in production, so there's 27 overall as it stands right now for Bond. More for Cameron Diaz. She's got like a little over 40. So
40, okay.
It's not a 1-to-1 comparison. I thought that it might be because she kind of called it quits early. Sure. But yeah, so I mean, it is a very, very big category. But also you got to think about this: how many times has Bond been spun recently?
Scott Mans.
A lot of Yes. And then how many times, Cameron Diaz, that,
Yeah.
And then how many times has Cameron Diaz been spent? I don't remember Diaz getting landed on too recently.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I can't recall.
So, I mean, it might be a bit more surface level, for Cameron. And I think that it was. I mean, there's John Malkovich questions and stuff like that. They're a little bit more. But, if you knew the movie, you would or if you knew the poster and you knew she was in it, you could probably, get your way through that.
That's kind of like the thing also with that category. It's being John Malkovich. That's like him. You don't necessarily go, oh, it's Cameron Diaz. But
right. You forget that she's in that movie.
Right.
You definitely forget that she's in that movie, and a very odd and strange role from her too. It's a very disturbing film when you watch Being John Malkovich. I'm not a big fan. Well, it's a good movie, but I'm not a big rewatch fan.
Sure.
But when she got Cameron Diaz, she goes perfect. I'm like, okay, we're back in it. We're back in it because Janine was my pick.
Fun fact about that: Janine is the only player this year in the singles division to have multiple perfect second rounds, 8 for 8. She's the only player to do it so far this division this year. So I mean that just shows you the quality player of Janine. Also, by the way, Janine getting 7 points in that first round, that's her third 7-point first round this year in her, or not this year, but her seventh in her last 4 matches. So she's had 7, 4, 7, and 7. So she's been playing really well in that first round this year. It's really, I think her studying's come a long way. And obviously her second rounds have been pretty good, with this being her second perfect round this year with going 8 for 8. So I know people will look at her record now and maybe even her accuracy rate, but she's been growing as a player, especially in the knowledge department. So kind of like how Mike was from Inner Geekdom. I kind of see a similar progression, not quite as rocket-like as Mike was in Inner Geekdom, but because singles is a little bit tougher to make that kind of jump. But she is clearly improving as the matches go on, and that's why we were saying it's only a matter of time before she gets that breakthrough win. I thought it could have happened here. It probably could have if Kalinowski didn't get Bond, perhaps. You never know. If you got another secret strength out there. So, but yeah, Janine's been playing really well. But the luck with Mike this year has just been unreal, and honestly, it's one of the greatest runs. It might be the great run we've seen for a single year from a player. Aside from Sam Levine's the only one I can think of that would rival this.
Sam Levine's the only comparable of having just a phenomenal year. Now, if Mike goes on to win the tournament and defend the championships against the Founding Fathers and whatever happens in that tournament, I mean, if he does all that, then we have a real contender. And, he's got Inner Geekdom still out there too. He takes down Mark Konopik or whomever else is going to be in contention for that championship. We're going to have a pretty interesting spectacular from Mike Kalinowski. He could potentially be competing 3 times in what is conceivably the 5 matches. Can you imagine that?
He could potentially be playing twice in Orlando. So that's,
Goodness.
He's got a lot on his plate.
It's crazy. It's super crazy, man. So, but when we got into that final round, we got down to the last question for Janine and the Machine. It was the question about Hotel Transylvania 3, I believe, of who played his father, Dracula's father, who was the voice actor, legendary voice actor, something to that effect. And the answer was Mel Brooks. She went with Jerry Stiller, which was a great guess. I was thinking Don Rickles, but I knew he was Mr. Potato Head.
Sure.
But I just, that was my pick because I didn't know it either. And she loses on it. And the first thing that happened, I went over to her after the match, and she was like, "Oh, I let you down." And I'm like, "No, you didn't." Yeah. I mean, you got Mike Kalinowski. He got Bond again. You find a way to get it down to one last question, and you just didn't know it. Yeah. I mean, I can't harm somebody for just not knowing it. To me, and I know he probably hates me saying this, but Kevin Smets has the worst answer in the history of the movie trivia Schmoedown now because he knew it and he just let the pressure get to him, or he let the moment get to him, and he wasn't thinking clearly. Janine just didn't know it, So I'm not going to ever falter for just not knowing something. And to me, that was a 5-pointer. That's a tough question.
It is tough.
I mean, Hotel Transylvania 3? I mean, come on.
Right.
3? So applause to Janine. She's going to have a killer season next season. She's still got Time Machine in the works.
That's right.
So we'll see what happens with that. But she definitely didn't let me down. Did she let you down?
No, not at all. And for the reasons I said earlier about her accomplishments this year in the division, taking huge strides and doing some things only she's done so far this year. And I'm excited to see what Ethan and her can do with Time Machine. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see where she goes draft-wise with the Nuke and all that stuff, and does Time Machine stay together? There's a whole lot to play out, which we'll get into all of that stuff. So, Janine did not disappoint me. I was more bummed that Mike got Bond because I wanted to see if he could do it without getting Bond. But that's the game. That's the rules, and, he abides by them, and clearly he wins by them. And it's just one of those unfortunate
it's just the game.
things.
It's just the game. It's just the game.
I can't hate the player. I can't hate the player because he's playing the game.
You can't hate the player,
not the game.
Yes.
Hate the game.
Yes.
Hate not the player.
I went up to Mike though afterward because I guess he was looking at the rundown comments or the rundown commenters, or actually the rundown snitches. That's what I'm going to start calling y'all, the rundown snitches.
Right.
Because y'all like to go and snitch on Frank, Janisch, and I whenever we're wrong, which for me is more often than not. Sure. But Mike was like, so you and Frank, y'all had something to say on the rundown?
Right, right.
And he was playing, but I was like, I was like, yeah, man. And I told him the same thing I just said. I was like, I just thought that she was due. You were due for a loss. She was due for a win. And he's like, oh no, I get it. 100%. He goes, I'm more nervous about Janine than anyone else I have in the tournament. Yeah. And we do know now who his second round opponent's going to be, right? Or his third round opponent. Or second round.
What was that? Semifinals. He's in the semifinals. Right? No, not semifinals.
Semifinals.
No. Wait.
No, second round. Don't F with me, Janisch.
Second round.
We do know who his second round opponent is, right?
Yes. John.
Right?
The Outlaw Roca. Because he
Thank you.
Treaty. And so there we go. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were the stat man. That's why I like to throw things to you.
There's a lot going on. When tournament season rolls around, there's just too much going on in here. There's just too much.
Yeah. You're like Rain Man.
I know too much.
Seeing nothing but numbers. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. So that's a really interesting matchup for Mike Kalinowski. Now, he said he was more concerned with Janine than he is about John Roca. That's what he said to me. Do you think that that's a smart strategy? Do you think John Roca is somebody he needs to take more seriously?
Yeah. Not more seriously, but just as serious. I think if he doesn't, he's in a... I don't know, actually. To tell you the truth, he could just spin Bond and just blow everything to hell. Screw it, he could just walk in there like, I'll spin Bond, take care of this, and
yeah.
But Roca's been playing pretty solid this year. I mean, yes, he had the triple threat number one contender match lost to Ethan Irwin and William Bibiani, who are set to do battle. Holy crap, that matchup. He's played well. He's played well, and I'll tell you this though, his first rounds can be rocky. His first rounds can be very rocky. He's one of the best second round players in the history of this game. He has a high accuracy rate, especially when he defers to multiple choice. And his usage rate for multiple choice is a little high for my liking in terms of being an elite player and sacrificing points to get the right answer. But when he does go to multiple choice, he's right way more often than not. So he's got that in his favor. So Mike can't steal because Mike has one of the best steal rates of all time, if not the best steal rate currently. So might have taken a drop, but nonetheless, he's very dangerous on the steal. So this matchup will be very interesting. It could be won or lost in that first round, much the way. Well, I mean, Janine was kind of lost in the final round, but this one I could see if Roca doesn't show up in that first round because he's like I said, up and down. Roca could be chasing a lot of the way.
It's going to be an interesting matchup, and again, I think it's all going down to the second round. I mean, round 2 is going to be the deciding round for Mike Kalinowski.
Usually
if he gets Bond, or if he doesn't, we're going to find out what Mike Kalinowski is made of. That's why I think on the T Public page for the Schmoedown, there's a shirt that says "May the wheel be with you."
Yeah,
I think Mike Kalinowski secretly has that under all of his clothes.
Probably,
he wears it. I think he probably got like the baby singlet, and he just kind of wears that underneath his very thin frame.
Right.
And I think that's why he's been I don't know. That's why he continues to win. But we'll see what happens in round 2. Frank Janisch, where should we go next? Should we go to the next matches? Should we talk about the Nuke because the Nuke was talked about there, or should we save that for the end?
Yeah, let's save the Nuke for the end because that's kind of a longer discussion. Let's see where we're at. I think actually I kind of wanted to talk about a couple of these scenes that we got this week because
break them down for us.
Some of them. One of them especially has some big implications. Another one kind of ties up a loose end. But, this week, I'll just run through them. We had Ben Bateman and Paul Preston, kind of having some pre-match back and forth. That scene was before the Kalinowski-Janine match. And then before the Stacey Howard-Brendan Meyer match, we saw Kaiser trying to cozy up to Emma Fyfe because of the Nuke. And he's trying to, get on the good side of Emma. Because he did that, he tried to get on the good side of Robert Meyer Burnett when he was in Power. Now that he's out, Kaiser's going towards the Power. He just wants to be friendly with the Power, and it's a smart move. But Emma,
he's smart. Through it. Yeah,
smart move.
Well, look, Kaiser's like a coach who works the ref. He works the ref. He knows I'm going to try to get in good. I'm going to try to let some things slide. So then maybe when something needs to break favorably my way, you'll think of me. That's what Kaiser's doing.
Yeah, and then you have this interesting scene after the Stacey Howard-Brendan Meyer match. Brandon Hanna and Ben Bateman have a scene together, and people were wondering, well, what's the deal with Brandon Hanna? Is he with the family? Is he with the Horsemen? Last week or the week before, whatever it was, we had a scene with, I think it was last week, with Brandon Hanna and Andrew Guy. He's hanging out with him. The family, and they're talking about the Nuke and all this. So you go, well, I guess he's really with the family because he did sign that contract, but we never saw any kind of closure in terms of him, shutting down the Horsemen. And this scene, we got it with Bateman, and where he calls him a loser, and and that he needs to wake up and all this and the other. So I think this should finally settle any kind of wavering thoughts in terms of where does Brandon Hanna really lie. This one pretty much puts that nail in the coffin that, for whatever reason, he just said yes to John Roca, and then, was like very flippant about it and joins the families, hanging out, shaking hands with Robert Meyer Burnett, hanging out with Andrew Guy, and then, tells Ben off. So, and Ben's kind of like, whatever. He goes back to playing his video game. So it was an interesting scene to wrap up that sort of little mini storyline.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see more, though, because this can't be the end of it. You know what I mean? This is like the Rise of Skywalker's trailer where you think it's over, then you hear the right? There's something more that we don't know. Well,
the only way we can probably get some more, because nothing's going to happen in the singles, the tournament, right, of the way, because none of the family's in it, and only Ben and Roca are still in it. But when we get to the team tournament, the family is in the team tournament, and it'll be interesting to see if the family and Who's the Boss, or if Who's the Boss, if they find their way into a matchup. We see Brandon Hanna come out. Well, we see John Roca representing the Horsemen with Who's the Boss. Could we see something before that match? That's the only thing I think we have to wait on and see, and that would be the only other time I think we kind of get some sort of conclusion before the end of the year. It'll be very interesting to see that dynamic and scenes and entrances and see what happens there, because that could, a lot of people think, oh, well, maybe Ben's a double agent and, him and Hannah, but with this scene doesn't make any sense if Bren was a double agent. I don't know.
There's the double agent, there's the triple agent, right. There's just a straight up agent. I don't know what's going on.
you know James Bond, you know this stuff.
I do. 00 status. Brandon Hanna definitely has 00 status because he's killed a couple people's hopes and dreams here in the last couple of weeks. So actually 4 other people's hopes and dreams of him being the 5th horseman. So we will see how this progresses.
But we got one last scene that was very, very interesting between, this is after the Ben Bateman Paul Preston match. It was Mara Knopik, we haven't seen in some time. She was looking for Robert Meyer Burnett. I guess she was hiding under the sink. She hides in places, tight spaces, I guess. But she was looking for Robert Meyer Burnett, and she ends up popping up right next to Emma Fyfe, who is now the actual Inner Geekdom commissioner, along with teams. And so that's exactly who Mara needs to be speaking to, not Robert Meyer Burnett. So she's missed, I think, some of the news while she's been hiding or down in that cabinet. So she's still wondering, Mara, when's she going to get her match that she was promised? When's she going to get to play for that title? It's interesting because Emma said, hey, look, that was promised to you, and it wasn't my doing, but because that was what was decided, I will do my best to uphold that. So, and Emma said, look, there's Inner Geekdom's pretty locked down for the rest of the year, so I don't know if we will see Mara sometime before the end of the year. I know there is that scheduled Chandru Dandapani match versus Brandon Hanna. That winner goes on to face Kevin Smets, and that's presumably, right now, a 1v1 number one contender match to go face Kalinowski at Spectacular. Now, with Emma having this conversation with Mara, is it conceivable that Emma steps in and says, hey, this was promised to Mara. Now, look, we can't, because of the way scheduling and everything works, especially with Spectacular, I can't just bypass these two other players who've worked their way here. So here's what we could do and make it a triple threat. Mara will then have to decide whether or not she wants to take that or not, or hold out for something better down the line, maybe, potentially. But that is a scenario that could happen. I know I've seen some people in the Facebook group say, well, why don't you make Spectacular the triple threat Inner Geekdom? Mike versus whoever versus Mara. So there is the potential something like this could happen. Will Emma go down that route? I do not know. But it's going to be interesting to find out what the path ultimately is for Mara this year.
You know what I would like to see? I'd like to see Bret Hart style WrestleMania 10. And I'm about to break that down for you, Frank Janisch.
Okay.
Also Yokozuna style. It could actually be either one because they were both there. Bret Hart and Yokozuna had 2 matches at WrestleMania 10. You know, Bret Hart opened the show with Owen Hart, and then he wrestled Yokozuna in the main event. Yokozuna had to defend his championship, WWF championship, twice because both Bret Hart and Lex Luger won the Royal Rumble that year because they couldn't decide who won, so they made it a tie. So Yokozuna, in the middle of the night, had to defend his title, and then at the end of the night, he had to defend his title. Maybe whomever the champ... Oh, no, we know who the champion is, Mike Kalinowski. Maybe he has to defend his title twice in one night. Make him go. Because really, Mara should be given a championship match or at least an opportunity to earn that championship match at some point. So I don't know. Maybe we could see her between now and Spectacular get a shot to earn the shot. And we could see Mike Kalinowski not in a triple threat, but defend it twice. Because we know there's going to be 5 matches, right?
Right.
At the Spectacular. So we know Star Wars, Inner Geekdom, teams, singles. What's the 5th?
Oh, boy.
We don't know, sucker. It could be that. I don't know.
So the potential for Mike to play Inner Geekdom once, Inner Geekdom twice, defend the teams, and possibly play for the singles belt 4 times? Ugh. Honestly, I kind of want to see that happen. Just because it'd be so absurd. I mean, at the end, his last match, you'd just be like, see.
What if he went perfect, though? What if he competed 4 times?
I'm not ready. After this year, whatever Mike was going to do and accomplish, I wasn't ready to put him on the Mount Rushmore. That's instant Rushmore. If you go 4 at Spectacular and hold on to all your belts and defend and win, that's instant Rushmore, honestly. I mean, he can retire after that. Well, he'd be
Mikey 3. He'd be Mikey 3 championships.
Will he at the end of the year? Are you asking me?
No, I'm saying he could be.
Oh, he could be. Yeah.
He still could be. That dream is still alive for Mike Kalinowski. And he joins us right now, making his debut to the Schmoedown Rundown. He is Brendan the Kid Meyer. And he's got another nickname too, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, I've heard. I think there is another one. Yeah,
there's another one. There's another one. I think that
I listen to the show. I'm aware.
I think it's the fine young tenderoni. Brendan Meyer joins us. I know, which I know he loves the nickname because he told me. But anyway, man, welcome to the show.
In spite of that nickname, not because of it. No, I'm just.
Welcome to the show, man. How's everything going? How is your day so far, sir?
Everything's good. I mean, it's kind of early in the morning, so I'm just, just still at home, getting up to stuff around the house.
I'm glad that we have you on.
Watching movies last night. Right.
You got to study because you have a big match. We're going to talk about that, but I'm glad that we have you on because I think we all know, obviously, you've been a fan of the Schmoedown. Obviously, now you're a part of the league. You've advanced in the tournament. You have a singles tournament and a teams thing going on right now, William Bibiani. You've been killing these cutscenes, but where did the fandom of the league start? We all started from somewhere. The wrestling aspect brought me in. Where did your fandom of the movie trivia Schmoedown begin?
Well, it's funny. So I've always been a huge movie fan, always, my whole life, and I've always wanted to be an actor and stuff. But it's always been like I've also then just been also obsessed with movies and what's going on in the industry and old movies, new movies, and I've always put a lot of time into like researching what kind of movies I wanted to watch and stuff like that. Pretty much probably since I was like 13 is when I really started being hardcore about it. And so my agent in LA, I've been with the same agent for about 7 years now. He's always known that about me. And it was totally a fluke thing where I was in the office one day and I made some joke about how if they brought back Who Wants to Be a Millionaire movie week, I could make a little like money on this side. because I remember there was a week where they asked just movie questions. They asked just movie questions one time. And I thought, oh man, that's because I don't know a lot about anything else, but I'm like, I know a lot about movies. Like I could definitely answer some questions about that. And he is, has known Kristian for a long time. So he was like, hey man, like you got to get a match on the Schmoedown. And I was like, what's that? And I didn't know at this point. And I became sort of like an instant fan when I started checking it out. And funnily enough, I'm not as into it anymore, but I used to be really, really into wrestling when I was a kid. Like there was a period of time when I was like 12, 13, where like I watched it like every week and 2 times a week, right? Because it was SmackDown and Raw and had a lot of like action figures. So there was like a period where I was like, so as soon as I started watching the Schmoedown, I got the whole like wrestling homage and triple threats, all this different four ways, the belts, the team belts, how Inner Geekdom was like intercontinental. Like I got all that stuff like instantly. So I was like, whoa, this is awesome. This is like a combination of something I'm super passionate about now with this thing that I used to be really, really into. So I get that part of it too. So it was a really, really cool thing. And so, yeah, I was just like totally in from that point. And thankfully, Kristian and Mark, they let me come to a lot of tapings last year. So
yeah, man,
it took a little while though, before I actually got in there. It's probably like 4 or 5 months of going to the studio before I actually got in there.
Well, let me ask you one more thing then. Since you said your passion's been movie, you used to be a big wrestling guy. Obviously, I work with Booker T. I'm a big wrestling dude.
Totally.
And
actually, weirdly enough, I think Booker T, if I remember correctly, I think he may have been the first wrestler I ever saw because I kind of remember the first time I put it on. I was like, this is cool. And I'm pretty sure it was Booker T, weirdly enough.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's a small world.
Which is bizarre too. Yeah.
But you obviously got to work with another wrestler in film prior, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Talk a little bit about working with The Rock, man.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, I only worked one day on Tooth Fairy, but it was with him and he was there and he was great, man. He was super, super nice. Yeah. It was a great experience. He was really nice, really friendly. And yeah, so that was a super positive experience. And yeah, I did think it was pretty cool.
I mean, to use wrestling terms, did you mark out at all when you saw The Rock? Were you like, oh my God, it's The Rock? I mean, it's The Rock.
I was pretty excited. I thought that was pretty cool. It was funny though, because The Rock was kind of done when I started watching wrestling too, though. So I was actually more of a fan of his from some of the movie stuff than I was actually at that time. Because I was probably watching wrestling like 06.
Oh, okay.
07.
Yeah.
Which was sort of like he was not. So I was excited because I knew him from the acting. But actually, weirdly enough, he was not one of the wrestlers that I'd been watching.
Oh, and favorite Rock movie? That's the last one I got. What's your favorite movie by The Rock? There's a correct answer to this, by the way.
Is there a correct answer? You put me on the spot here because I'm going through
Obviously,
it now.
Tooth Fairy's not available to answer.
I really liked. I mean, I did think. I'm trying to think it now because I'm trying to go in some of the action stuff that he's done too. I mean, the new Jumanji I thought was really, really good. And I thought he was really, really great in it. I thought it was really, really fun. That's the first one that comes to mind. But I feel like there's probably one.
I'll take that.
Yeah, there's probably one that I. Yeah, no, it is great. No, it is great.
Yeah, okay. I've always liked The Rundown. Get it? That was the joke. That was the joke. You know what? I've
never seen that one actually. I know that movie though, but I've missed that one.
That's one that you got to go check out. Okay, so now boom, you're in the league.
5-pointer against Ben is about The Rundown.
Exactly.
Yeah. Watch.
I would die. I would. Oh man, that would be.
Well, it won't happen now because I'm gonna go research it pretty heavily now. To ensure that can happen.
But let's talk about though. Now you're here. Now you're in the tournament. You're in the singles tournament. We had Paul Oyama, the singles champion, on the show a couple weeks ago, and his dream opponent is you. he would like to face you in the Spectacular. Talk to me about your relationship with Paul Oyama, and do you see that for happening? I mean, obviously you're going to go on in the tournament. I mean, how are you thinking about that potential main event for the Spectacular?
Well, obviously, I mean, that would be a total dream matchup. I mean, as Paul talked about, and it's totally true, Paul and I have become really good friends through the Schmoedown, so that would be really, really fun. And obviously, just to play for the belt. It's hard for me to get too ahead of myself when I've got, a tough opponent coming up in Ben, and then possibly, an even tougher opponent in the final. So depending on who it is. So it's hard. It's like, certainly I've thought about it, and I've thought about how great it would be I think just removing who I am and who Paul is, to have two people play as rookies in their first match, and then by the end of the year, they're playing for the belt at the end of the season is really cool. I mean, that's just a cool storyline, but it's going to be tough because I've got some tough opponents coming up. I bet maybe if I can get past Ben, I'll start thinking about it, because then you're only one match away. It's a 5-rounder, so I think that it adds a lot of things to the mix, a lot of variance. So that's when I'll probably start seriously thinking about it. Is probably if I can get past Ben. But obviously, I've thought about it in a general sense. It'd be pretty cool.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because you said you started going into watching the matches for 4 or 5 months, what have you. When did you start developing kind of like, hey, you know what? I kind of need to strategize. Like, I have a lot of good movie knowledge already, but when do I need to start looking at this as an actual game where I got to strategize? When did that kick in, or did it not happen until you first played your match, or what was that like, that process?
You know what? I'll be honest. It probably didn't kick in until after the first match. And I did put thought into the game. But I think there was a part of me, and I think before you play, it's probably easy to think this, where I'm like, there's a little bit of strategy, but at the end of the day, it's either you know the questions or you don't. That was kind of the way I always felt. And I don't think that anymore. I think that there's a lot of nuance to the game. And I mean, Frank, we even talked about this when I was there for the New York event, in that Paul has really, I think, changed the game in a lot of ways.
How so?
Because he's one of the first people, and I remember even talking to him in the taping before our matches. I think he's one of the first people who is such a fan of the game and not just movies, that he's utilizing the game to win matches. And that's why I happened to be there in New York for the match against Snyder. And I thought, and he had told me a couple weeks earlier, he said, I might put Harry Potter on the wheel. And so I was like, oh, wow, that would be really crazy. I mean, I honestly didn't even know you could put intergeekdom things on the wheel. I mean, but I guess Ethan had done it with Star Trek at one point. So I just hadn't registered that. And so it was funny. I was looking forward to that match to see if it would work. And I thought it was quite thrilling when it actually worked. And he has this huge swing in Harry Potter, which shouldn't even technically be on the wheel, and winds up winning really just because of that. I mean, he goes to sudden death and it's a 4-point swing. I mean, it's probably the only category up there where there's probably going to be that largest swing, likely.
No, great
maybe
point.
Not. You never know, but so that was really interesting. So I do think so. I think Paul, and I remember Paul even from the very beginning would say stuff like, "Well, maybe I'll put his weakness on the wheel," and that even opened my mind. I was like, "Oh, putting a weakness on the wheel? Whoa! Like, isn't that for your strengths?" Like, it's just sometimes when you come into the league and you just watch it played a certain way, you just kind of click into that way of thinking. And I think what's interesting about Paul is he's figured out other ways to sort of utilize the game beyond just movie knowledge, which is interesting. But definitely after that first match was where it kicked in, because going back to that first match, and Paul and I have talked about this too, and I've talked about this with other people. One of the biggest reasons, not so much why I lost, but because why Paul never had to go to his 5 in that match, is because of strategic errors in the second round, right? Playing more aggressive in that second round when actually it would have been smart to play more conservative, because I don't know how I watched so many matches. I went to the taping so many times, but it had never clicked in my head that if you're within 4 of your opponent, you always will force them to answer their 5 if you know their 5. So a 2-point lead is not drastically different than a 4-point lead. Even a 1-point lead is not drastically different than a 4-point lead against a really, really elite opponent. Okay. And that's not something that because if you guys probably are following this, but it's like, the idea is you'll always have the chance, right? So Whereas I think against Paul, I got super aggressive in the second round, like, oh, I'm behind. I know he's going to answer a lot of questions right. If I think I know it, I should just go for it because I need to get back in tied or get back in lead or only be down by one. But really, if you play conservative, you can always give yourself a shot. So it's just interesting when you get down in a match. So it'll be interesting to see. It's just little things like that I wasn't thinking about, you know?
And then what was your first reaction? So, you know, Frank has had the opportunity to be a part of the Schmoedown from a, you know, on stage hosting the pre-show perspective. I've gotten to sit at the desk and call a couple matches, and it is always the thing of like, oh, whoa, okay, hey, I'm here now. Like now I'm involved, you know. What was it like the first time you're sitting down against Apollo Yum? I know you talked about the strategicness of your strategic errors rather in the match, but what was it like walking through the curtain, sitting at the desk, looking over at, you know, the announcers? I mean, did you? I know you'd been to the tapings, but was it like, oh, okay, this is real?
Yeah, well, there's a literal feeling, which is really funny because I'd never gone and like sat behind the desk for fun when I'd been there for whatever reason. So there was a real moment where I sat down and I went, I've been in this room so many times and I've never seen it from this. You know, the announcers are right there as opposed. It's like weird. It's a weird thing with your mind, but you really are like, oh my God, I've never seen it from this angle before, which was cool. But I will say, what's really interesting about kind of that first match is the first match was really just fun. And I think I had a lot more fun than I even thought I was going to have. And I remember like through 2 rounds, I had like 7 points. And I was like, this is literally my worst nightmare going on. Like I knew I could do better than that, you know? And I was like, oh boy. And I was still having a good time. But what surprised me was how much it did eat at me after the fact, the loss. I think that was the thing that I didn't expect. Like it was less stressful being up there than I thought. It was more fun. But then like a couple of weeks later, you're like, Mean Girls or the Ozarks, you know, and it does wind up getting at you in like a really, really interesting way where like, I remember when the match came out and I was like, oh man, this sucks. Like, it's funny because like you know what I mean? It's just funny the way it got to me a lot more than I thought. I was like, I can't, like, you have that thing where like, I can't believe like I went there for 5 months and I lost. Like the first time I played, like I lost and barely wasn't knocked out, you know, so TKO'd. So yeah, it's funny.
Frank?
Yeah, I want to kind of jump around a little bit because the Schmoedown has these storylines, and the one that seemed to come out of really your performance out of Free For All was this friendship with Bibiani, and then the storyline is that you would come in between Bibiani and Whitney. When you're first approached about, hey, look, I got this idea, I want to go this route. What was your thoughts on the storyline? Because obviously when you first come into it, you're just kind of focused on playing the game, playing your matches. Yeah. But then there's this other thing on the side that's really just all for fun, and it's you know, just playing with other people in terms of characters. Yeah. What was your mindset in terms of potentially, I don't know if it was right away that it was decided or the potential team up with Bibbs?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly like spoken about shortly after the Free For All, but obviously I wanted to make sure, I mean, you know, it was the same thing. I had to make sure Whitney, you know, obviously there's the storyline, but you know, he does have to be okay with it in real life as well. And he was, which is great. And will be thankful to him for that. And, you know, Bibbs also had to be okay with it too. I mean, what's really interesting is Bibbs and I didn't know each other that well. You know, he was someone I knew super well from watching the show, but, and he was very supportive to me in my first match actually with Paul, which was kind of cool. He was very supportive and, even talked to me afterwards, like, hey, it was still a great match sort of thing. But yeah, so I think it took a while. Not that he agreed right away, but like it took a while for him to know if this was the right fit for him as well. And
gotcha.
It was, but I think it was always the plan. It wasn't ever really in flux. I mean, I certainly I remember I played the Drew Grant match. That was the next match I played, video Drew match. And that was probably the most stressed out I'll ever be for a Schmoedown match because I was sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm 0-1. And no one knew Drew. They didn't know if she was like the next Ethan Irwin or not, or if she was really a solid player. It's a solid player.
Yeah.
But we didn't know. I mean, she could have been the next. Yeah, no, me too. But it was interesting. And so I was pretty nervous because I was like, you know, if I go 0-2, like, are they going to give the 0-2? Like, it was kind of like, I don't want them to be forcing the kid on people. You know what I mean? Like, he's 0-2 and he's Viviani's new partner. Everyone's like, come on. Like he's 0-2, so I felt a little bit of stress there. So that was probably the most like stressed I've been
That's a good point.
for a match, because it was never said to me like, if you do well. It was always like, you guys are going to team up. But I did feel an internal pressure to like not
yeah, because we've seen in the past players go on some pretty long runs in the free for all.
Yeah,
and then they play their next match and it's kind of a clunker. You look at John Humphrey.
Right. Yeah.
And he went like the distance, or he went like 11 rounds with some of the big hitters in the league. And then his first match he has in singles against in Draco, and just not good. So I never thought about the fact that in your next match, there's going to be a lot of pressure, because I think the audience kind of assumed like, hey, he's going to play well. He looked really good at free for all. This is the type of player that he is, but you got to go out and prove it at the same time.
Yeah. Free for all is interesting because it is so luck based. I mean, so much of the free for all is dependent on luck. I think that's why I sometimes feel I have to pinch myself with everything that's happened since, because as much as obviously I had the ability to go however many rounds, I think it was like 12 or something. I mean, a lot of people in the league did, and it just kind of went my way. But I felt like almost more than, I mean, maybe there was a few other people, but like more than most people, I needed that, like I needed it to go my way to kind of get back some momentum within the league. So it's funny when you look at, what's happened since getting these 3 wins, getting the first one with Bibbs, being well situated going into the teams tournament and all this stuff. I mean, a couple fluky things going other way in the free for all, and I mean, it could be a totally different story. So it's a really, really interesting. I mean, I'm always I have to be thankful because I kind of saw the darker timeline. You know what I mean? Like I kind of saw. So it's kind of funny. I sort of saw like I go out in one round of the free for all. I'm one round of the free for all. They're not about to partner me with Viviani.
You're like Iron Man in Age of Ultron, where you just see this awful happening.
There was what thousands of outcomes in which I would have helped. This is the only one.
Only
I
one.
had to lose to Paulo Yama to enact this timeline.
There you go. That's crazy, right?
It is pretty crazy. And then when you found out you're going to be in the singles tournament, I mean, what were you thinking then? Were you like, okay, now pressure's on? Or, I mean, what was kind of your initial reaction?
No, totally. Well, first of all, I wasn't sure because I know they've done 16 in the past, but I know they did 8 last year. So I wasn't even sure in the middle of the year that I would 100% be in the singles tournament either. I didn't know that 100%. So I was a little bit nervous about that. But when I found out I was in, I was excited. But going similar to the thing with Drew, I did feel a bit of a pressure to get to 2-1. I did, and going up against Whitney, obviously there's no real personal bad blood, but there is a part of you that's like, okay, this is the storyline.
Right.
It would be nice to not have the storyline end with the kid actually losing, you know what I mean, to, Whitney, like, oh, you blew it, Bibbs, big mistake. I guess he's not so fine and young after all. That would probably not have been, ideal. So, and what's really funny about that match is I was actually super nervous for that match too, because it was the first round of the tournament. It was this whole storyline thing. And that's probably the one match where I think if Whitney hadn't spun opponent's choice, I don't know how that would have wound up going, because I just felt more nervous that time than I ever have, actually, even more so than the Drew Graham match. I remember being up there and just being like, oh man, like my brain's not. I mean, there's a question in the first round about Maleficent that I feel like I know any other day of the week, and for whatever reason, like the minute I didn't know it, my brain was like, oh man, this is the big match. You don't know. So it's really, really interesting. So that's another one where I think I got a little bit lucky. I mean, I might have still been able to pull it out, but it would have been much closer than it was.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. That's why I always say, like, the Schmoedown, when you try to compare it to a sport, I think it's comparable as golf. I mean, because golf is a game of skill, great skill. Right. You have to be fine-tuned at it. You have to practice, but there's so much luck involved. The wind, the elements, the way the grass is cut. I mean, there's so many elements involved in it to break your way. And I think that, like you said, opponent's choice doesn't come up. I mean, it could be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, that's funny. Golf's actually my favorite sport, actually, to watch. Actually, I'm a big PGA Tour guy. I'm like a diehard. So it's interesting to hear you say that. But I think it's very, very true. And one of the things about the Schmoedown, too, that's so similar to golf is, you play your own game, but then whether or not you succeed is entirely dependent on the other person for the most part, right? Mm-hmm. And it is that thing where you can go out and I'll say, look at like Chance Ellison. Look how well Chance Ellison plays, and it's just happened to be against these sort of like a match against Viviani. He misses like 2 questions. It's like, that's just going up against, and that's happened a lot of times in golf, right? Where two guys separate themselves from the field, and you think, oh my God, you were better than like the 100 other guys that played,
Right.
but because you were up against this one guy. I actually went to the Open in, I don't know how well you know golf, but 2016. There was the British Open, which was Phil Mickelson versus Henrik Stenson.
Yep.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
And I was there actually, which was really, really cool. And they totally separated themselves from the field. It was crazy. And I just thought, oh my God, Phil Mickelson was like 10 shots clear of the nearest guy. He plays like out of his mind, and he lost because Stenson put up like literally the lowest score of all time,
Yeah.
And that can happen, right? Against, I mean, I
Absolutely.
think look at what happened with, got in Draco and Bibiani in that first match, and Draco goes out there and plays a great match, but doesn't get to win because, Bibiani breaks, I think,
He would have
breaks
beaten
the record.
any other player any other day. Except
yeah.
He just happened to play that one guy.
No, totally. And I think that's what's sort of interesting going into this upcoming match against Ben, in that, you don't really know until you get in there quite what it's going to feel like. It's sort of like and same with this match against Stacey too. It's like, you never know like what way the wheel is going to go. And so you don't ever really know what kind of match you're in until you get into really the second round of like, oh, this is one where I happen to know a lot of them, or, oh, this is one where I'm not doing so well, or it's really interesting.
Well, I want to get into the Stacey Howard match because in your first
She
round,
could be Stacey Meyer someday. You never know how the cards are going to play.
you go 9 for 9, you get the bonus, and she only gets 2.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, what is it like to sit up at that desk and to know that you're kind of running away already in the first round?
Yeah.
And it's a second round of the tournament, and you're like, are you trying not to get ahead of yourself, saying, look, I'm already going to the next round. I'm playing whoever next match.
It's a really, really interesting situation because, kind of like this actually totally feeds into what I was saying before, is that usually it takes a while in a match to really know who has the upper hand, right? It can take a little time. And so, you don't wind up thinking about winning until maybe the third round, sometimes even later, depending on how close it is. But yeah, you go up 7 points. You're automatically going to start thinking about winning, right? Not in a cocky way. You start thinking, oh, like you're saying, I could win, man, I'm up by 7. And it's funny, I remember being up there because all the air goes out of the room, right? You can feel, but it's actually worse for you in the lead because you realize everybody in this room is going, only one is one. And you go, I have it, I'm up here, I know. You just start seeing, and I said this in the post-match, 7 points weirdly feels not that far away when you're going in the second round, because you start doing the math in your head. You go, okay, if I get a weakness and it's kind of like what I'm saying about getting within 4. It's like, okay, if I get a weakness and I wind up getting like 3 points in round 2, which has happened to me before.
Right.
And she gets like a strength, like she did against Mark Riley or something. She gets 7. All of a sudden I'm only up by 3. And suddenly it just like whittles away, so you do still have that anxiety of like, well, I can see how this can fall apart. And even the match against, Drew, I actually had a pretty good lead in that too. And then didn't have a great round 2, made a silly mistake on the 2 where I just mispronounced, had the name spelled wrong in my head. And all of a sudden that match could have slipped away too. So it's hard up there. You think that you get 7 points clear and the pressure is gonna ease, but it actually almost doesn't in a weird way. You start to go, well, if I lose now, this is really gonna be off.
Right. You want to be that guy that lost a 7-point lead.
And maybe it's just the way my mind works, but I start thinking about that. I start thinking about, oh my gosh, I could be the guy to lose a 7-point lead in the second round of the tournament. Though, of course, if I was down by 7, I'd be like, it's over.
Yeah, you're right. No matter what, you're thinking you're losing.
At one point, I'd be like, it's over. I'd be up by 10. I'd be like,
but when we get to round 2 and the wheel doesn't necessarily break in her favor, she's looking for something like a rom-com or something like that. She ends up getting spy movies. Fate had it destined, and she doesn't do too well. I don't know exactly how many points. What was the point total?
You got 3 points off of that
3
category. Yeah.
Definitely round 2, we always say, is the make or break round. It's a round that could kill you, sink your ship 100%. When you saw her only get to 3, you were, at that point, you had to feel more confident, at least, especially going into the last round. She has to answer every question correct. And if she does that, you only have to answer 1.
Yeah. Going into the last round, I definitely did feel confident at that point, for sure. Because, but it's interesting because, when she didn't get a strength, I started to feel a little more comfortable. because I thought, okay, here we go. This is good. Now, there's still a part of you in the second round where you're like, well, if I spin a weakness too, it could, we'll see what happens.
Right.
But for the most part, I felt pretty good there. And yeah, once I think I was up 10 going into the final round, I felt pretty good about that because I feel pretty good that it can happen. I mean, we saw it happen to Paul in New York, but I felt pretty good that I'd get at least one right. I think if I'm in a match and I got to get the 2, the 3, or the 5, and that's it, I'll usually feel pretty good about that. So yeah, no, I was more confident going into the final round for sure.
Yeah, I think the final of the match was 16-6, I believe.
Yeah.
And Stacey Howard comes up short. Now you advance to the next round, and you're going to be playing a guy who a lot of people have earmarked for greatness in this league. I mean, Ben Bateman, almost a couple months or a couple matches after he was in, people were like, oh man, this guy could actually be something. And we've seen his prowess at Oscars, movie release dates, obviously action movies he does well in as well. I mean, he has a deep and wide breadth of knowledge when it comes to movies, but he's always kind of been right there, almost there, and then falls short. How do you feel about going up against a guy like a Ben Bateman now so close to the end of this tournament?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly am nervous about it. I mean, he's hungry for it in a way, and I don't think that I don't think that any of the people I've played, maybe not Paul, we'll take Paul aside, but the 3 people that I've been able to defeat, I think it's fair to say Ben wants it more than they did, and like that's not a slight to them.
Sure.
That's about Ben, and so this is definitely the first time since Paul that I'm going against someone who is really hungry, really hungry to succeed, is doing the studying, is doing the thinking about the strategy. So that is going to be a big challenge, I think. And I think what's interesting though is that Ben and I stack up together in an interesting way. I mean, I've talked to him about this. I mean, Oscars is my strength as well. I feel really good about it. Even movie release dates, I don't know if I'm as good as Ben at that. I would never say that, but it's not something that I think would sink me if I was in, I don't think that, it wouldn't be like the guy match, where if he gives me that, all of a sudden it's an automatic finish, right? And I think that Ben uses that a lot strategically, right? Where he's like, well, I can give movie release dates, or it's really smart to have a strength that most people in the league might not be as good on, or even nearly as good as you are. So, but I think I match up pretty well against him. And I'll be honest, and this is not a slight against Ben at all. It's more because of what I've just said, but I think I would have preferred to play him than Paul Preston, actually, in a lot of ways, just because of that matchup, just because of that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see, but either way, I mean, it's going to be really tough. I mean, Ben in the tournament has been incredible, actually, in a way that maybe he hasn't even been all year. Sure. I mean, Liz Miller and Paul Preston both. He put up, I think, 20 plus both times.
Wow. He went pretty perfect against
casually.
Paul, so
yeah. Oh wow, I forgot that. I didn't realize he had actually gone perfect. Yeah. So I mean, that's the whole thing. Is that he's been on another level. So I definitely consider myself the underdog, but I think it's going to be interesting because, I do go in with a slightly different mindset than I did the last time I played somebody that I thought was better than me. I thought Paul was way better than me, but he's probably knows more than I do. And I've learned lessons of how to minimize the damage or play. I mean, if I get down a couple to Ben, I'll play differently and I'll have a chance to sort of enact this new strategy and this new mindset, and see if it works. So it'll be interesting.
The interesting thing too about you and Ben playing against each other now is I remember in New York, and I think I might have said this after I came back from that live event. You and Ben, there was you guys were having a conversation. I was there, and I could tell, man, he was just sizing you up in terms of release dates or Oscars or what. I was just, and he hasn't even played his tournament match or whatever, this isn't even a possibility. We don't know if you guys would play. And he's already looking at who he could potentially be playing, and it was you. No, totally. And he's asking you, when this movie came out, and it was just fascinating to me how he was already scouting.
He was doing that
you.
last week too.
Yeah, exactly. So he's always gaming, and that's one of the great things about Ben being in this league is that he's always gaming, and he's looking for that edge. He's taking it seriously, and you're right about the hunger part. I mean, I don't know if there's any other guy who's as hungry as him right now. Maybe a couple, but
there are people as hungry, but there's very few who are more hungry, I think, if any.
So it's very interesting that you two are going to play after he's been, Scouting.
I should have really gamed him on the scouting. I remember I'm usually honest. I don't like to be that guy. So like, I'm pretty honest. Like if I know the answer, I'll say it, or I won't try to like, but man, I should have totally sandbagged it. And like,
Right.
I don't know anything about, well, you know, what was weird. I think they once called release dates one of my strengths in my opening where I never told them to. I think it's a mismatch. And I remember being backstage and being like, wait, what? Like that's not, so now it's out there. But I was like, I didn't even tell them to say that.
Ben is a guy though.
But yeah, no, I should have just sandbagged it. I should have been like, I don't know.
And he is a guy who I think cares so much that sometimes he does trip himself up mentally, because I remember when he was here in Houston, we were out the night before and he was asking people like, hey, you got me right in this match against Guy. Like, you got me. And when people would tell him no, like he was thrown off by it. Like it really did bother him. So he is, like you said, he's so locked in, he's so laser focused, and he's so confident in his abilities. I think that y'all two is really going to be a fun matchup.
Oh man.
Yeah. I think what's tough for me is that I've always thought every round of the tournament, if I just get through this one, I won't be nervous anymore. You know what I mean? And the problem is, if you would have told me near the beginning of the season, like going to be in the semis against Ben, I would have been like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you know, he's such a great player. Like if you lose to him, no shame. But it's like, now I'm just one win away from Orlando. So now I'm nervous too, because I'm like, that would be a pretty sweet trip.
And you know what's interesting about Ben's run right now is he's played Liz Shannon Miller, a rookie.
Yeah.
Played Paul Preston, who's a rookie. And I was about to play Brendan Meyer, who was also a rookie this year. So it's very, very interesting. But another thing I was kind of curious about was, are you surprised at how serious this has become for you? Like how serious you've taken the game? I mean, like you're just like, hey, I'm going to go up there and answer some questions, have some fun. But now you're kind of reminiscing about the loss or the missed question. And it eats at you a little bit. Are you surprised that, like, holy crap, I'm actually pretty invested in this more than I thought I would?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what's really interesting is that it is some of the stuff we talked about, how you can, how having the right mental state of mind can help you, how thinking about the rules and strategy can help you. I think that's the stuff where now I'm more invested in it than I thought, because when you really do start playing it, you do start to see that sports-like learning curve, and so that's what really got my hooks in. And like, oh wow! And also, even which I've really enjoyed doing too, is deciding what kinds of movies you're going to watch. Like I think I said this to you in New York. It's like and I think Kalinowski and Chance being the champion shows this too. Kalinowski being in detail as well. It's like you have to love the Schmoedown now to get the belts. You can't just love movies. I think it used to be where, hey, if you love movies the most of anyone, you'll probably win the belts. But now I think you have to really, really love the Schmoedown. And I think that's true of Bibbs too, right? Someone who they say is the most knowledgeable person in the league. I think that what makes him so dangerous is also how much he loves the Schmoedown, right? He has a real passion for the game and for the strategy and all that different stuff. And as well as being someone who maybe is the most sort of knowledgeable.
Yeah, I think when the game is the most fun for you, in regards to Bibbs, you're in that mindset. You're in that mode where it's enjoyable. All aspects of the Schmoedown are enjoyable, because he's talked about it before. You know, when he was doing the kind of the heel thing, wasn't really his vibe, and it kind of, I think, zapped a little of the fun for him. But now that he's, you know, teamed up with you, he's changed his whole persona in the Schmoedown. He's in a different mind space, and we're seeing the results of that. I mean, that win over Ethan Irwin twice now is just, you know, I think that comes from a different kind of mental headspace, and he's a dangerous player in this league given the knowledge he already has. And I think you're right about, you have to love the Schmoedown as well as obviously know the knowledge in order to be at an elite level to contend for belts. And that's, I think, probably a big shift that's been happening in the Schmoedown. So I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, you really have to. And I think that just I have been even more invested than I thought I was going to be, which is cool. I mean, that's fun. I mean, you want something to grow in your admiration as you become more involved in it. You don't want to sort of get in there and be like, you know, like I really, really have, you know, enjoyed it even more than I really thought. It's really been a fun thing. I like the whole community though. I like all the people that I've met through it. I really enjoy being a part of the community. And yeah, there was a while there where like, and I think Paul spoke to it a little bit in the interview you did with you guys. And I felt the same way, where there is that imposter syndrome thing where you first start and you just feel like, you know, sometimes it feels like, I mean, I still maybe even not quite there yet, but sometimes it feels like your matches are happening in like this different weird league and all the other ones are like the ones you watch. You know what I mean? You sort of feel like even if you're having success, it feels like weird. And so I feel like just lately I've started to really feel like, oh, like, I am like, like you're saying, there's a lot of rookies this season who've done really, really well. And you do start to feel more ownership over the Schmoedown. You feel a little more a part of it. Like the guy who's the champion. I played him at one point, so it starts to feel more like something that resembles, your experience, people you actually know, as opposed to just like all these people that you've watched from afar. So It's pretty cool.
It is awesome, and you've had such an awesome season thus far. Also, Shazam's going on a good path right now. By the way, phenomenal team name. But we have a big match ahead, and I can't wait to see you versus Ben Bateman, and then see what happens after that. Brendan Meyer, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You've been absolutely phenomenal. Let the people know where they can find you, follow you, and all that.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, Brendan KJ Meyer, because I had two middle names, Kurt and James. So Brendan KJ Meyer.
My middle name is James as well. I knew I loved you.
No way. All right.
Mine is not.
No, his is Meyer, actually. It's really weird. But anyway, that is Brendan the Kid Meyer. We'll be back with more Rundown after this. And welcome back to the Rundown. Great interview there with Brendan Meyer, the kid, Brendan Meyer, a.k.a. the fine, young Tenderoni. He is here, and he's here to stay, Brendan Meyer. Frank, we still have a lot to discuss, and we're already like an hour 15 into this show, and we still have even more to talk about. Let's talk about Ben Bateman, Paul Preston, though, rather rapidly. Just overall opinions on the match, and I know there was a little bit of a controversy.
A little bit, yeah. But first round, though, two perfect first rounds with the bonus from both of these guys. Just stellar play. I mean, and both were actually kind of going through some stuff. Ben with his back and Paul with his wife, and we'll get into that a little bit towards the end of the show. But look, to go up there and play like that was phenomenal. It's what you want in these types of tournament matches, is this level of play. Usually, you don't see a whole lot of this in the first round just because that's kind of how first rounds are. And then the quote-unquote real tournament starts after the first round. You're like, okay, we've kind of gotten through some of the weaker matchups, if you will, and now these are the people. We're in the thick of it. And that's exactly what both Ben and Paul brought here. But in the second round is where things got interesting. And by the way, I mean, Paul put up 5 of his own points in round 2, which is not the best, but not the worst. So it was a very above average second round, which is, what all you can really do, especially when you're in his position, because Ben defers to him, and now Paul's got to kind of figure out, he's got to play kind of ahead without getting ahead of himself. He's got to kind of see down the road without actually going down the road, or know what road he's going to go down. So he's got to, whether or not to go multiple choice this many times, and he got burned on his third question, which Ben stole for a huge 2 points. But Ben, he gets movie release dates, huge strength. I mean, Paul was fortunate to get spinners and pick directors, so it's pretty much been even in terms of strength of play. But Ben gets to his fourth question about the Seven Samurai, and it's about the release year, obviously. But it should be prefaced that in the question, it does say American theaters. Now, Ben goes to multiple choice. He guesses, I think, 59, and then bounces to Paul, and he says 54. Now, with this, Paul is correct in the sense that the movie did come out in 1954, but it came out in Japan in 1954. It later released in U.S. theaters in 1956, and that's what the question was asking for, American theaters. And you can kind of go back to the 1957 Academy Awards, because it was nominated in the 57 awards, which means it would have to have come out in U.S. in 56. And when you saw Mark Ellis talk about it, he's like, we have some people come up here talking about this release date, this release date. And it was interesting because I was sitting next to Andraco, and he pulled up one year. And then Dan Merle came walking by, and he pulled up another year. And I was like, oh, God, okay. If these guys don't know what the actual, if they're coming up with two different answers, and we're talking about Draco and Merle, like, we got a real situation here. But if you just Google Seven Samurai, and you look on the right side, it'll come down, it'll say 1954, and in parentheses it says USA. So if you just looked at that, and you go, wow, USA 54, that's when it came out. But if you click the IMDb link, and you look at the release dates for it, it has Japan at 1954, a couple other countries at 55, and it didn't come to the U.S. until 1956, which makes sense because they were nominated in the 57 Academy Awards. But what they ended up doing with that question was throwing it out. Even though Paul Preston guessed the actual release date of 1954 or knew the release date of 1954, it wasn't the U.S. release date of 1956. So they decided to throw out that question and give him a new one. And really, you can be, at that time, I was like, okay, that's the right ruling. I think that's fair. But now when I have a chance to watch it back, what they really should have done was just award nobody any points. Because the multiple choice had the right answer of 1956 in there. I think it was like 59, 55, 54, and 56. Ben picked 59. Paul picked 54 because it was multiple choice. The actual answer for the U.S. release date is 56. So what they really should have done was say, no one's right, and leave it at that. Instead, they gave a new question, and it benefited Ben because he ended up getting a full 2 points on that fourth question, and that kind of opened up a bigger lead for him. I have not seen the comments on this one yet because we're recording before this is actually public, so full disclosure, I don't know how the rest of you all think about it. Brad, when you hear this kind of confusion or, what's your take on the whole movie release date issue here?
It's rough because one of the things that the competitors don't get that the fans do are the questions in written form. When you're watching the game from home, you're able to read, blah, blah, blah was released in what what year in American theaters. And when you're in the room, you got to listen for it. You have to listen very expertly to every word in that question. And if you want to hear the question again, you have to ask for a repeat. You don't get to read it at the bottom of your screen. So a lot of the times, I think the competitors, they have to just go off what they remember hearing, right? And Paul Preston picking 1954, which was correct in a sense, it's really rough. I think that obviously the right call was made because the question was specific. It wasn't an ambiguous question.
Right.
It wasn't a general question. Had it said what year was it released, then I think that we have more of a controversy than we do by saying what year was it released in American theaters.
Right. Then Paul definitely gets the point for that if it's not specified. Because he's technically correct.
If it's not specified.
Right.
If it's not specified, he gets the point. I think that, hindsight being 2020, he probably would have benefited from a repeat. Now, he may have said the same exact thing because he's not wrong. And like you said, when you Google it and it comes up, it does say USA 1954. But as we know, the internet has a lot of misleading information. So if you dug a little bit deeper, you see the right thing. So it's a really rough question to have to go through and get wrong. It sucks because technically he's right. But in the same sense of when the Stacey Howard match, her question, and I wanted to bring this up actually, and I'm glad that I'm thinking of it now. The question was, Toy Story was the first film released by Pixar in 1998. What was the second? And I said Bug's Life. But it wasn't Bug's Life. It's A Bug's Life. And I'm thinking, would I have gotten that wrong if I was in her seat? I guess I would have. And the same thing here. It's like, not year was it released. What year was it released in American theaters? And that's the specificity of the game. And that's why articles matter. That's why, obviously now regions of release matter. Everything matters when it comes to the question. And you have to just listen to it a little closely. Now, is this probably the first time we've seen something like this? Yeah. But I don't think it'll be the last.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, mathematically speaking, in terms of how the points would have worked out. Let's say Ben gets that question wrong, right? And Paul gets the 1 point. The only difference here is that Ben then would have had to have answered a 3-point question to win the game. Now, if he had done that, then he would win the game, but he also would have had his 5 if he had not answered the 3. So he still had 2 more opportunities in the 3 and a 5-pointer to win the game had that decision went for Paul and they just gave him the 1 point. But that's not how it went. Do I feel confident Ben would have got his 3? I feel decently confident, but you never know. And I'm sure Paul might think about it and say, maybe I could have fought a little harder for, maybe not, maybe if no one gets the point, it's I think that would have been the correct ruling. But even myself, because I was there for the match, I was like, in the moment, I was like, just throw it out. Just throw it out and just give him a new one. And, that was in the moment. But watching it back, I'm like, oh, shoot, actually, they should have just said they were both wrong because they were.
Do you know what this question actually reminds me of? It reminds me of something at the Spectacular last year in the Manager Bowl, a match that I was privileged to call. And what it reminded me of was Huey Lewis versus Huey Lewis and the News.
Oh, right.
It was who performed the song Back in Time. And it's like, well, technically Huey Lewis performed it.
Well, he sang it.
Right. He sang it. Yeah. Or I think it was who sang. Maybe it was who sang.
Maybe it was who sang.
I think that was the question. It was who sang the title song from, Back to the Future or Back in Time, rather. And technically Huey Lewis sang the song, even though Huey Lewis in the News was the artist of record. So I think it's almost like that.
Did Huey Lewis ever have a singles a solo career?
No, he's always been Huey Lewis.
Oh, he's been Huey Lewis in the News. So, like, if he had a solo career, then you're definitely wrong if you just say Huey Lewis.
Right.
Much in the same way, if there's the thing and thing, if there's the room and room. Like, that's right. That's where you get into that kind of territory. So
that's kind of what we're thinking about here. So it sucks to see, but Ben Bateman does come out victorious in that match, and he's going on to face Brendan Meyer. He went perfect, and this is perfect with him playing 70%.
Exactly, and I didn't realize it at the studio. I didn't realize he went 15 of 15 because of that whole multiple choice Seven Samurai issue that kind of just went over, I think, past everyone's head. I don't know if someone said that at the studio at the time. I couldn't tell you, but I was recording the stats and I was like, oh, wait a minute. He went 100%, 15 of 15 for 20 points for the win. And look, it was funny too. In that first round, Ken gets on the mic, obviously, and at the desk, and he says, "Oh, this is Ben Bateman's first perfect, first round." And Ben's up there like, "Nope, that's not true," which is technically correct. However, it was for singles. So, and it's funny too because that came from me, and then I have Ben up there saying no, and I'm like, wait, what? Am I wrong? Oh my! Like, no, wait, singles, because he did have one in teams when he teamed up with Dagnino. He got that perfect first round. That was his very first one. It was a teams singles. So I felt bad for a little bit, but I was like, no, this is singles. I'm right.
You're right.
Yeah. So there's that.
Oh man. Anyway, a great match. Can't wait to see what him and Brendan Meyer do. Now, Frank, this has been an extended edition of the Rundown, but we have still more to go. Let's talk before about the Nuke. Talk to me about Paul Preston and the situation with his wife. Yeah.
So the community found out that Paul Preston's wife, Karen, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and I think it was at stage 4.
I believe so.
So, very devastating news. But what this community did and has done and will do is we rally around those that are in our community, and we pick each other up when we're down. And there's a fundraiser on Facebook. They're looking to raise $30,000, and once the word spread, we blew past that. I don't even know what's at now. I'm sure it's maybe closer to 40 at this point. And it was like 34 when I last looked, but this community, Paul talked about it in his post-match with Jen. He's like, he's only been in this for 5-6 months, and people he doesn't even know or met are having online charity streams. I know Call to Action did something, and we're trying to raise money to help fight this, because cancer is a bitch of a disease.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough on the person who has it, and it's tough on the family who love that person and their friends. And this community just rallies. And I know, and that's what makes me so proud to be a part of the Schmoedown is the community. And when times get tough, we're all there for each other. And so, definitely when I heard this news about Paul and his wife, my sister, her late husband had passed from cancer. So I've seen firsthand what it can do to loved ones and the individual. So, definitely my thoughts and prayers have been towards Paul and Karen, and it's a tough time, and I have to, I was glad that Paul and Karen were able to make it to the match, because just for a little bit, it was just a normal life, quote unquote normal life, playing some movie trivia with some of your friends and kind of get away from all that. So I was happy they were able to do that, but he's in a real fight, and all I can say is my thoughts and prayers to him and his family and Karen. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I got to talk to Paul Preston was when he was here on the show, and he was so good, and I had such a fun time with him. And I made sure when I saw him at the tapings, I made sure just to talk about things Rundown related. I didn't want to just jump into anything else because I figured he was here. Or was there, try to get his mind off things and just to have fun and focus on his match. So I just told him how great he was on the show, because he was phenomenal. And I really enjoyed him being on, and I hope that he's on again. Having had, close loved ones, not with pancreatic cancer, but other devastating diseases such as Parkinson's, I understand, how rough it is to go through those things. So it's awesome for me to be a part of this community as well, Frank, and to see how we take care of our own and how we rally around and make sure that we do everything that we possibly can to help others around us. I think that's more of a reflection on the type of people the Schmoedown attracts than anything else. We all attract people who care deeply about the Schmoedown and the people in it. So I know that there's several things going on. I think go to the Movie Trivia to Schmoedown Facebook group. I know Mark Ellis has shared it quite intensely on his social media. We're going to share it on ours as well, so everybody can see it, and go contribute anything that you can to help Paul and his wife through this tough time. And hey, man, if any community can do it, and if any people can will something to existence, it is the Schmoedown community, and we're going to will his wife and Paul back to 110%. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that they get everything that they need in order to do that. So my thoughts and prayers are out with them, of course, and we're here along for the fight. Absolutely. Frank, to transition though, let's talk about the news that was on the Schmoedown Throwdown. We've heard a lot about it. There was some leaks about it. We led people down the primrose path, but the nuke. The nuke was finally announced. Frank Janisch, what are your reactions to the nuke?
Well, when I first heard about the nuke, I was excited. And then I was like, how is this going to work? How is this going to work? Because, so, it's laid out. Factions are pretty much poof, gone, right? 10 teams or 10 managers are going to draft 10 players for their team. Now, we don't know the full list of managers yet. We don't know the full list of players yet. And there will be trades. There will be, all things of that kind of nature, right? We do know that the top 5 teams at the end of the year are protected, which means they cannot be split up. Now, I actually don't know if that includes the champion, the current champion at the time, or not. I didn't get clarification on that. Then teams 6 through 10, they are also protected as long as the drafting manager of said player on a team wants to keep the teammate as well. If you do keep the teammate, then you lose your next round pick. So if you drafted, let's say you draft, let's say the odd couple, right? Let's say they're number 6, and you draft Jeff Snyder. As the manager, you can decide whether or not you want to keep Mark Andraco or not. If you keep Mark Andraco, then you lose your second pick, your next round pick. If you decide not to keep him, then obviously you can draft the next round. So there's a lot of that to be ironed out by the managers themselves to figure out what they want to do, game planning and all that. But if you draft a top 5 team, let's say Founding Fathers is still around, and they don't have the belt, or they even do, you draft them, then if you draft Dan Murrell, then you're automatically getting John Roca and you miss your next round pick. If you take the champion, if you're the manager, actually, rather, I should start with that. If you're the manager, let's say Corruption holds onto the belt the whole year, and it's spectacular, at the end of it, they have it, Grayson Ken or whoever's the manager, they can decide whether or not they want to keep the champion. They have, it's like kind of like part of a keeper league essence. So you can decide whether or not you want to keep them, or you could just trade them. That's up to you as a manager. So there's a lot of moving parts that we know so far. There's going to be more, I think, explained as the weeks go on. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see who the managers are going to be, who they decide to take, when they decide to take them. It's very interesting because Inner Geekdom throws a big wrench into this because how do you look? Inner Geekdom by far has the fewest matches of teams in singles. Singles has generally had more matches than teams, but it's getting more and more even. So it's kind of a toss-up. Do you want to hold on to Mike Kalinowski, who's a triple threat? He's not always going to play a lot in Inner Geekdom. I mean, if he's the champ, like in all three, he's only going to be defending, and that's 3 matches right there. So you're going to have to look at a bunch of different factors. But Inner Geekdom is a really interesting one because look at Chandru, Brandon, Smets, right? And Mara. All very, very good players. Do you want to take them in the first round? Maybe not. Do you want to take them in the second round? Maybe. Third round? But why would you if they're only going to play like 2 or 3 times a year? As opposed to another guy in singles, let's say just for fun, Josh McCouga, he plays 4 matches in singles alone, and he's on a team. He plays a couple more with Wildberries if he's still with Elliot Dewberry, right? So he's playing up to maybe 6 matches a year, as opposed to this Inner Geekdom player, only Inner Geekdom player, and they play 3. If you're really good, you play 4 because you play for a title and all that. So I don't know how they're going to figure out how to do Inner Geekdom, how to weight it, if it's just going to be just pick when you want to pick and let that be. But the other issue, I know I'm going long on this, Brad, but the other issue
you're good.
is you have 10 slots for 10 players. Now I've heard you don't necessarily have to fill all 10 slots. That's up to you. There'll be other new players coming in as every year we have, so you can do what you will with your slots. However, the interesting thing is if you have a team, what is the scheduling going to look like? Because let's say you filled all 10, everyone fills all 10. Let's say there's 100 players, right, drafted. How do you schedule players, or for teams and managers specifically, so that it's even across the board, so that it's fair, so that, all right, because not everyone's might necessarily draft an Inner Geekdom player, and I guess that would kind of be on them. But if even they drafted them, they might not even play an Inner Geekdom. I don't know. That's the weird thing is, how do you assure fairness across, Team A has played, amongst other players, has played a total of 6 matches, but then at the end of the year, Team B only played 4. Like, how is that? How are you going to correct that sort of disparity? Because that's going to happen, I feel like, the way we know it right now. Now, that may change down the line. Something may come out, and this is what we're going to do. But these are just some of the questions that I have for it, that maybe there are answers to it already. We just don't know it, but and I know a lot of other people out there have questions too. And my thing is just be patient, because I think that information is going to come out sooner rather than later. Especially by the time we get to Spectacular, I would like to think that we have this kind of we know how it's going to go down and all the mechanics of it. So it'll be interesting to see things trickle out in the next couple months.
I think that this is a necessary move, though. Just like Anarchy was, just like all the moves and the vast changes in the league that we've seen over the last several years. This just makes it more of a sport, even more of a sport. And to me, I know we were just talking about Harry Potter with Brendan Meyer a little bit. It reminds me of the House Cup, from Harry Potter. You know 100%. What I mean? It's like the House Cup. And, is it going to be Gryffindor or Ravenclaw or Slytherin or Hufflepuff? And the stories that go throughout the league, throughout the year. I mean, that's really going to be cool too, to follow different teams. And to me, it really is like the NBA, because the NBA, there's no other sport, I believe, that is, team sport, that is so reliant on star players. right?
Yeah.
You know, one player, like look at LeBron James. He goes to the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Cleveland Cavaliers are almost dead last in the NBA as soon as he leaves. And this is a team who was in the NBA Finals 5 years in a row or whatever, 4 years in a row. So, and LeBron was in the Finals 8 years in a row. So it just shows how much a star player can affect a team. And I say that to say that's the same thing with the Schmoedown. And these teams are going to be so controlled by star players. And I always have loved the idea of trades. I love trades in the NBA. I think they're one of my favorite things. I play all the time on the NBA trade machine and just try to see what I can make happen. And I love the fact of trades, free agents, contract buyouts, waiver wire things. The drama of the NBA really is what keeps me in tune throughout the entire season, or the storylines that are happening. And I think that we're going to see the same thing in the Schmoedown. Is, you know, some player isn't looking good, and they're like, oh, I don't know, man. Or maybe he's not a personality. He or she's not a personality fit. So they're going to look to see if I can, hey, well, I'll give you Jeff Snyder if I can get back, you know, Stacey Howard and Josh McCouga. You know what I mean? And just try to, you know, work out trades that way.
You can trade your draft picks.
And trade picks. Hey, I'll trade you my first rounder if I can get, you know, or something. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different variables that happen, and I really, really enjoy that. And it's going to make the Schmoedown even more from a shoot perspective, because I'm assuming a lot of these managers might be making these decisions out of storyline. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people are going to be like looking like, oh, I don't know, man. I don't really like how Jeff Snyder's been playing. I'm not trying to crap on Jeff. He's just the first name that keeps popping in my head. I don't really like how Jeff Snyder's playing, man. I might need to look for a trade here. I mean, you know, or I don't really like how Paul Oyama's doing. He's not the same as last time. So there's all these things, and I just think that the Nuke is going to make the league all that much more exciting.
I just wonder if these managers are going to draft their friends, or are they going to draft with their head? You know,
they're going to draft with their head. We know how these people in the Schmoedown are. They're drafting with their head.
Are they really? I don't know.
Well, no, you know what? Actually, I take that back. It depends on who the managers are.
Sure. Yeah, 100% too. Like
100%. Kaiser, I think, is going to go with his head. But
like,
you know,
let's say,
maybe,
let me give you this
scenario.
Let me give this scenario. Roxy, number 1 pick. She has a number 1 pick. You know, she's gung ho about her boys, Andreyko and Snyder. Is she really going to not take an Ethan Irwin, a Bibiani, a Dan Merle over Andreyko or Snyder? Like, that's what I'm wondering. Like, stuff like that. Like, if you're Kaiser and Smets is your boy, do you not take him as your first pick? Because, look, he is an Intergeekdom player, even if he ends up with the belt, right? Now, if he ends up with the belt, the Intergeekdom belt, that is, then Kaiser doesn't have to worry about that. He can hold on to him and sacrifice his first pick. Fine. But if he doesn't have the belt at the end of the year and Smets is in the draft pool, does Kaiser go, I can't take you in the first round, buddy. I got to take, you know, Ethan Irwin. I got it. And then the pick after him takes Kevin Smets. You know, and it's just, look, that's the stuff I'm looking forward to. Specifically with draft day and all that stuff. So, no, you're right. This is going to be a lot of fun. And I just couldn't help myself. So with the last week's cheat sheet, I did my first draft board, Frank's big board. And I ranked the players that so far are ranked this year in team singles and Intergeekdom. That's the only players I used as kind of like the first board. The second one I'm going to do on this coming Monday will be a different board with players who have played who aren't ranked, teams that have played that aren't ranked that I think will play next year. So it'd be a much more, I think, inclusive and more comprehensive board. If you're into that kind of thing, check out Cheat Sheet on Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, and I'll go into that. I'll also, I guess because we're kind of wrapping up here, I'm going to be getting into, I guess at this point we are, I'm going to be getting kind of into Kalinowski's luck of the wheel, because in the live chat for the throwdown, I was like, this demands an investigation. I need to know what is going on in here. And so I'm going to hold true to that, and I'm going to touch on that on the Cheat Sheet Monday night about just exactly how many times has he spun Bond? How many times has he put Bond on the wheel? When did he first put Bond on the wheel? Actually, the first time he put Bond on the wheel in singles was his match against Clark Wolf, the number 1 contender match that he was chosen for. That was the first time he actually ever put Bond on the wheel in singles. We'll get into teams and all that, blah, blah, blah. So if all those Mikey fanboys come on down, I know you'll love it.
Oh, yes. Well, Frank Janisch and the Mike Kalinowski saga continues. But what do y'all think of the Nuke as well? Let us know. Comment below. Do you like the more sporting aspect of the movie trivia Schmoedown? Fantasy Schmoedown will even kick into a higher gear.
Yes,
we'll have to talk all about that more next week. We want to thank Brendan Meyer for joining us on the show. And once again, man, I know this was a marathon episode, but I want y'all to tweet us. Tweet at FrankieJ29, at Brad Gilmore on Twitter. Well, let's get into conversations about the Nuke. Who would you draft first? Would you trade your first round draft pick? Are you only going for champions? What would your strategy be? I would like to know, because I like to get into all of this stuff. And I think, Frank, prior to or probably after the Spectacular, we will have to do our own draft, mock draft.
Definitely.
For everyone out there. We have to do that. So, anyway, once again, at FrankieJ29, check out that cheat sheet every Monday at 8 p.m. Central on the Schmoedown Rundown Facebook, right? Schmoedown Rundown Facebook, right?
Yeah, the
Yes.
Facebook page. Yeah.
Facebook page. Okay. And then also check out me, Brad Gilmore, Hall of Fame, Monday through Wednesday on ESPN 97.5. And check out also the Schmoedown every single week. And support that SEN, Schmoedown Entertainment Network. If you're not a patron, go be a patron. All right? We need the patrons. And if you're not a patron, you don't want to be a patron, Super Chats, brother. Get into the Super Chats. I think, Frank Janisch, you and I should host a live Super Chat one day for the network. I think we should do that. I think the people would like that.
I think the only money we would get would be like from my mom.
Hey, Mama Janisch has deep pockets. She's got the long green ducats. You know what I mean? Everything helps. Everything helps. Anyway, for Frank Janisch and Chris Clark, my name's Brad Gilmore. We'll be back next week on the Schmoedown Rundown.
That was a marathon.